Hello everybody and welcome to the TheKabooblesProject. I'm your host Cora. Thank you so very much for joining me once again as we do a little bit more sculpting. Here we are going to be sculpting I don't know how to describe this. He's effectively a Mindflayer detective from the 1950s. What more do you want from me? Continuing our little detective series, I sort of wanted the bugbear that we sculpted very recently actually, to have a sort of partner in crime. They could go around together in the Forgotten Realms, solve crimes in the 1950s, and do cool stuff together, do a buddy cop drama or something like that. I have no idea. So we're going to call this guy the Sherloctopus. I thought you'd like that. Forgive me. That's all I can ask. Please forgive me. And I'm going to talk through this a little bit and just tell you about some of the key things that we did to make this happen. The first step on our journey together is, of course, the face. We're going to just start with the face, get those major forms in there. We're going to have 3 face tentacles. And of course, this Mindflayer needs a sort of humanoid body with some elongated fingers to make him just look a little bit creepy. So our first major task is to get the pose right, get those major biological forms into place. So we get their head and face in there. We start to do a little bit of expression work there because I know roughly I want him down to one side, smoking a cigar or something, and looking back up at the camera as if he's noticed something. Sort of similar to the bugbear, but in the other direction. So they're sort of imagining they're kind of back to back and both being both being alerted by the same thing and looking over, which I think is fun. So yeah, I wanted him looking down and kind of back up so we could get away with doing some fun expression work there with one eyebrow raised. It's one of my favorite expressions to sculpt, by the way. And so with that, we then create the body and we create the arms. We keep all of those things, and now we're creating this kind of little fedora hat. We're going to keep all of those things very, very separate to one another while we're working at this point. The reason for that is that we can pose the mini. So we may not be quite sure, right, here we go there, we're just making some pose adjustments to get the arms and the head and the body all in the right place, make it look realistic. You know, we want to keep everything separate at this point just to make sure that we can play with it before we get into too solid a place where it gets more difficult to play with. If it's all one form, then you have to use the pose brush. And the pose brush is really good for fingers. It's really difficult to use it for large forms because if the forms are too close to each other, the pose brush catches too much of it and you have to use masking and stuff. It's a bit of a nightmare. So we keep everything separate, up to and including his little tentacles, his face tentacles, as we keep them separate to one another. Here we try doing a little bit of kind of soft surface sculpting, dynamic topology sculpting with the snake hook brush to create the tentacles, and then we decide to use this little approach that I was using for hair for Ivor and Koshi. Effectively, we create a path and a circle. The NURBS path, then we go into the options and we say effectively that the circle is the cross section that we'll be using for that path. And then for each different point along the path, you can shape it and change it. Alt S to scale it, or Control T to twist it. You can do some amazing things. It gives you a huge amount of power and control about where those tentacles are going to lie. So again, we're going to keep them separate and in place. I'm not going to do anything too detailed with them yet until I'm very, very happy about their position, because it becomes difficult to move it once we boolean it all together. Of course, as we're doing our main forms, with the hat done, we now need to do fingers, and this takes ages. It's really challenging work doing fingers. If you're looking for a tutorial on fingers, just pop a comment in the comments down below. I'll do a tutorial for you. They're actually not too tricky once you get the hang of them. The sort of secret, if you like, is knuckles. Once you use the blob brush to get the knuckles in place after you get that major form, then the thing sort of hangs together really nicely, and it's just so much easier to sculpt the fingers once the knuckles are in place. So you see here, I'm sort of getting those knuckles done as a sort of priority, and then the rest of the form can just fall together like you sculpt. You deflate between the fingers and inflate where the finger bones are and just get the biology right. But still, even then, it takes me ages of kind of going back and forth over each finger just to make sure that it's right. And even later, we'll go back and do a bit more again, just because I'm very rarely satisfied fingers are very recognizable biological forms, and anything that's super recognizable like that can easily slip into the uncanny valley. So you know, it's one of those things you just have to go away from. We're going to sculpt some fire here because I think it'd be fun using a mixture of kind of the paths approach and some sort of dynamic topology to create the central flame. The effect I think is kind of okay. I think we can do better next time maybe. Fire is hard to sculpt, guys. It's just hard to sculpt. But even then, we're going to go back over the fingers because after you've given it a bit, you go back and you see the fingers again. You're like, oh, now I see what the problem is. Like that joint is too short or something. Or, you know, there's too much emphasis on these knuckles. Something like that. And then we'll go back and change it. So now it's clothes time. Now that we've got those kind of key biological forms in place, all of his body is in place. It's super naked right now. So it's time to add in some clothes. And we're going to use this approach that I quite enjoy, and that's an approach where we use the hard surface sculpting or box modeling to model the transitions between the clothes and his body. So where the collar is, where the cuffs are, where we know the shirt is going to end, we use box modeling to sort of highlight that transition. Because those transitions are going to be, like, they're going to have hard edges. We want to preserve those hard edges as much as humanly possible. So we're not going to boolean them into anything else or touch them with dynamic topology until we are very sure that things are looking good. And then what we do is we go over the form, like his biological form, and we start to add in creases and a bit of volume in order to make it look like shirt instead of arm, basically. Although that sort of basic biological form underneath where the muscles were, where we sculpted originally, that has, you know, it still has that basic fundamental form, which means that it's still going to look right, even with these sort of lots and lots of creases over the top. The basic form is still anatomically correct. That's why we start with like low detail, big changes, and then we go gradually to higher and higher levels of detail. Because even when you're doing these high levels of detail, those basic biological forms are still key. They're still really important. We still have to, you know, they're still going to come through in the sculpt. So, having done quite a lot of creases, we use dynamic topology entirely for creasing the shirt. There's some argument for using some hard surface there, but I decided not to. I really wanted to have a play with dynamic topology doing it, and actually it's just an awful lot of fun losing yourself in that kind of stuff. So you just get a feel for where those creases should fall on a shirt. You know, around the belt they should be tighter, so we create some tighter little folds here, and then we create, like, if you think, oh, his arm's up, so we're gonna need to put some more in there. We notice on the back of shirts, of course, they have that little pinch of cloth fabric in the middle, so we create that, and we just keep going until it looks good, really. And every so often we'll feel like it's wrong, and then we go back. We create here some little creases, sort of outward edged creases for where the shirt forms, like the pieces of fabric meet, because there's a little bit of there's going to be some like firmness around those connections, so we add that in using the crease brush. Really good fun stuff. And now that we're happy with all of the major forms like the tentacles in place, it's time to boolean it all together and get in those details. So we use the crease brush and the inflate brush to add in all these details to the tentacles, using the blob brush to add in the little tear ducts in the corners of the eyes. Surprisingly important when you're looking at eyes to have that in there, make it look realistic. And with the tentacles, every bend in the tentacle, we use the crease brush and then inflate around the creases to make it look like the tentacles are kind of splurging, if you like, as they bend around corners. And then we just keep going back and forward over the form, over the face in particular, because, you know, the face is the thing we have to spend most of our time on. It's the thing that people are going to notice first. So we just keep going back and forth over it, adding detail after detail. We're now about 5 to 6 hours into the sculpt, I think. Actually, I think about 5 hours into the sculpt at this point. And again, with the hat, the soft surface sculpting needs to come in, because while it's a manufactured form, it's still kind of, it's worn and it's been used a lot, and it needs to have that sort of, you know, worn look, and there's nothing better than dynamic topology to create a little bit of blobbiness. So we add that in there. Finally, we add a few details to the cuffs and to the shirt, moving things around a little bit just to get everything in place. And then it's time to add in these really fine little details just to make the thing pop. You know, when people look at the sculpt in detail, they'll see these little details. It doesn't matter how close they look, they're going to keep noticing new and fun little things. The little braces here, the little adjustable clips on the braces, and we're going to add a tie clip even, just to kind of, I mean, apart from anything else, to make sense of why the tie is so close to the body. And we're going to add a little belt buckle, and then it's just finally, you know, fingernails. This is the sort of highest level of detail stuff that we do. We go into fingernails and those final little bits. And then I think we do a little bit more booleaning just to make sure that we cover the final transitions between like the head and the body. There's quite a lot of transition stuff in there that needs to be tidied up. But after that, we're basically there. Just a few more bits and pieces, some little final little creases here and there because they're really fun to sculpt, and we're basically done. So, if you'd like to see this sculpt in detail, or if you'd like to download it, you can go to MyMiniFactory. You'll see a link in the description down below. Otherwise, thanks so very much for joining us here at the TheKabooblesProject. You are always very welcome. We do so love having you here. Please pop a comment down below, and feel free to like and subscribe. I wouldn't really be a YouTuber if I didn't ask you to do that. God, what has happened to me? Thanks very much. We look forward to seeing you next time.